Hello, everyone. Come on in, get comfortable. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your lunchtime together. As you're coming in, I want to give you a micro housekeeping note. You might want to have a post-it to hand or a notebook, whatever kind of works for you, a blank doc, a Notion page, whatever works for you, because we'll be doing a few exercises as we go through. But that being said, if you are not in a position to do that, maybe you are walking the dog and tuning in your headphones, fear not, we are recording. So you'll be able to go back and do the exercises and still just stick with us and take in what is top of mind for you. We'll give it a few moments for more folks to make it into the Zoom, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. As we're doing that and everyone's sort of joining, I'd love if we could just have a little bit of a check-in in the chat, right? I want to make sure everyone's able to access it, but B, it's nice to get to know each other. So I'd love to know, what's top of mind for you around this topic? When I say personal branding, what does it mean? What is going on for you? Right? So you can share anything you want around the topic of personal branding. Maybe you want to refresh yours. Maybe the entire concept freaks you out. Maybe you've been told that it's a thing that you should look into, right? What's your background? Let me know in the chat. Be sure to set it to everyone because I'd love to know what's top of mind for you right now around this topic. Okay, amazing. So we've got how to show up as you and use your power to make a difference or influence. Oh, love this. Enhancing my profile within the business. Huge. Daunting. Haven't really thought about it too much. No problem. Children's writer and B2B PR, and I'm not sure how to tie my personal brand together to balance both. Oh, love some multi-passions. That is great. I can see that somebody has their hand raised. We're going to just stick in the chat for now. But if your hand's raised because you need support or anything, you can look in the chat for panelists and just message us as panelists with what's going on for you. You might have to hop out and hop back in if it is a technical difficulty. No worries at all. How to put yourself out there online. First step is scary. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So just be sure to put it in the chat and that it's set to everyone. So not the Q&A, but the chat. It literally just says chat. Because we're all able to read each other's check-ins because we're all in this together. And ultimately, when it comes to personal development and personal branding, we're always learning, we're always evolving. So we will definitely have something for every single person in this room as I walk through the session. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to be mindful of our time together. So we're going to kick off with some introductions. So no, what you just did in the chat isn't an introduction. I'm going to share what a personal brand is. I'm going to share the secret key to personal branding, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. And of course, we're going to have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So on the lines of Q&A, this is again my second housekeeping message, we will be using that at the end. So I want to encourage you to add your questions as we go along. Don't feel that you have to scribble them separately and then try and remember them. Just pop them in as they come to you, because the beauty of that, just like the chat, is you'll be able to see each other's questions. You'll be able to understand maybe what's top of mind. And I will find it super easy when we come to the Q&A to pull those up and go through and be as helpful as possible in our time. Okay, so personal branding is a huge topic. It's something I love talking about. And ultimately, this is about how our personal brand is driven by values, right? I've spoiled the spoiler already, because ultimately, when it's driven by values, this then influences our behavior and the impression that we leave on people. This is going to be more about an inside out approach to your personal brand. And we're going to look at several elements rather than just maybe image, right? Which is often how personal brand can be viewed. We're going to go into the nuts and bolts of personal brand, what it is and isn't, We're also going to understand our personal values as the secret key, and the importance of congruence between our values and our behavior. I'm very handsy. Values, behavior are connected. And ultimately, in that same sense, our values can also find congruence with our organizational culture. And that could be, for you, it could be the company that you work for, or it could indeed be the industry that you exist in, right? The segment, the niche that you provide your service or your product to. So I do want to caveat this by saying that this is relevant and applicable, whether you work professionally, whether you're an entrepreneur, or whether you are like me and you are both. So a little bit about me. My name is Jazz Marfo. I recently got married, so you will see we promoted it as Jazz Broughton. I am she, same person, just different name. I'm an ambitious woman. I'm a certified coach, specifically for high achievers, the folks who always have a goal and something they're working towards. I am proudly multi-passionate. I work in tech. I have worked in tech for about 6 years now. I'm a community manager for a product analytics tool, and I am a career coach. Also, I'm ever so slightly obsessed with career growth. I am a lover of R&B and tea, so always down to talk about those things. And I'm on a mission to really empower 10,000 people to embrace ambition. Now, that's a little bit about me, but what I want to know is a little bit about you. Now, of course, my name is Portion can feel a little bit redundant on Zoom, right? But what I would love to know is your I am part, right? Linking back to who we are and what we do and how we show up in the world. I'd love for you to take a moment in the chat by way of check-in, by way of introduction, to share an I am. And like I said, you could put whatever you want at the end of that. Make sure it's set to everyone in the chat. You could say, I'm a mother, I'm tired, I'm cold, I'm hungry, I'm a business owner, I am a senior leader. Whatever your I am is, I'd love for you to just give us a little nugget of who you are as we start off this session. So I will sip some water while you do that in the chat. This is why this is my favorite way to intro, folks. Confusingly ambitious. We have to talk. I love that. Lifelong learner, obsessed with telling and consuming stories. Amazing. And once you've done that, I also want to encourage you to share your LinkedIn profiles in the chat. And the reason why I do it in this direction is that we get to meet each other in a more genuine and authentic way. Sometimes LinkedIn can feel a little bit cold or impersonal, especially when we're at the stage when we're not quite sure what to do with it. So now, as you scroll through the chat, you're able to learn a little of that person and then go ahead and connect with them on LinkedIn. So please also take another moment right at the top of the session for you to add in your LinkedIn profile. If you drop it as a full link, as Natalie has done, it's super easy to just click. And of course, the chat isn't disappearing, so you can come back and grab all of these later. I'll drop mine in there. But this is what is so beautiful about doing it this way. You now know a little bit about Millie. You now know a little bit about Kimberly, about Helen, about Beverly, about Preeti. Like, all of this is amazing. Great. So now we've introduced ourselves a little bit, let's explore the topic at hand. What is personal branding anyway? And I'm a big fan of definitions. So this is the Wikipedia version, right? So I didn't actually go to the dictionary because Wikipedia was a little bit more fun. And I love it because it's quite comprehensive. But you also see that I crossed out a part at the bottom, right? And this can be really, really interesting because in many ways, it's kind of important for us to accept the fact that that final sentence of personal brands being deliberately modified to reinvent a public persona does happen. And I know when we think about it in terms of celebrities or folks who have done horrendous things or whatever that kind of may be, we think, ugh. But we also have to accept the reality that part of personal branding's power is this. It is that you can show up, and if you're anything like me, you can come from a hospitality background and find your way to tech with your personal brand. right? That can be an instrumental part of your strategy and things like that. So I want us to lean into that, and to a certain extent take the shadowy parts with the bright parts. But ultimately it's a perception or an impression of you, and this is based on someone's experience of you. It's based on how you articulate your expertise and competencies. It is based on your actions, so how you show up and your achievements and what you share. In many ways, we're giving information throughout our lives without even realizing it, and this is a space for us to get more intentional about that. And this is exactly what I mean by authentic. It's not us pretending to be another version of ourselves or a persona. It's about us amplifying the parts of ourselves that we really want people to know, because ultimately when it comes to personal branding, my hope for you, and I'm biased because I'm a career coach, is that you're able to create a personal brand that not only feels natural and authentic and consistent, whatever your definition of that word is, but allows people to mention your name in rooms that you're not in, allows people to make introductions on your behalf, allows people to consider you for opportunities simply because they feel they know enough about you to know that you'd be a great fit. And that is a powerful thing in your career, regardless of whether you're an intrapreneur, professional, graduate, wherever you are. It's always really helpful for us to do our part to plant the seeds for others to be able to help us blossom. And then when we look at personal branding, we also then come against a few myths. So especially for those of you whose heads explode when somebody says personal branding, you're just like, oh, why me? Why now? Okay, fine. I want to get clear on the things that we should kind of throw in the bin, right? Personal branding isn't for other people, right? It isn't for just the celebrities. It isn't reserved for Lady Gaga and Beyonce. It is also not encouragement for us to be inauthentic. Like I said, it's the amplification of what already is. We're not making something up. And in that sense, it's important for us to know that it's created from the inside out, not the outside in. We don't sit down and go, what does the world want from me? Let me show up and be that. That is not only unsustainable, it's absolutely exhausting. You know, this is a huge, huge mistake and a misconception that I see people make. And ultimately, I like to think about it in terms of, being good people. You do not become a good person by doing good deeds. You begin as a good person who just happens to do good deeds, right? It's inside out. And it's ultimately less exhausting that way. And in that way, you create something that is powerful, it's memorable, it's not exhausting, and it is authentic. The truth that you should know about personal branding and personal brands is that they're both online and offline. So yes, I asked you all to share your LinkedIn in the chat. Some of you might not have LinkedIn profiles. It's absolutely fine. You can have so much power in your personal brand based on how you show up in an offline way. And ultimately, before there was the internet, we were all looking each other in the eye and having conversations in person anyway. It's about those rooms that you're not in. Again, we're planting those seeds quite intentionally of the things that folks should know about us. In the same way that you introduced yourself and you said something at the end of the I am sentence, you've made it easy, even in that split second where you did that, for somebody to go, oh, I know a somebody, right? Even I'm just looking in the chat at the moment, and Cheryl has shared that she's a self-enablement coach who helps women become the best version of themselves. You, by sharing that so generously and really, really amplifying what it is that you do, you're leaving me with that little nugget that I can go, oh, I know somebody who is a self-enablement coach for this type of person, right? That's a quick example. It's genuine, authentic. It's also about what you are great at, not good at. I'm not here to poo-poo what you're good at. It's still very valuable. But when it comes to us being considered for opportunities, when we think about the traditional interview process, when we also think about the pitching process, when we think about folks making decisions to invest in us or not in terms of time, resource, or money, we want them to know what we are outstanding at. What do you do differently or at a high level than anyone else? And really what I'm talking about there are your strengths. I'm also talking about the impact that you create. And this is a big thing that I see folks kind of do. We harp on the fact that we are, let's say, flexible and adaptable. Okay, give me an example of that. Give me an example of you really excelling in that space. Because I kind of think in 2023, we should all be pretty flexible and adaptable by now. And if we weren't, pre-pandemic, we are now. So give me something extra. Give me something that makes it easy for you to stand out in my mind amongst all the people who are flexible and adaptable. You also want to embrace your uniqueness. And I'll use myself as an example. I shared with you all that I am ever so slightly obsessed with career, but I also shared that I'm a lover of R&B and tea. I also love cheese. These are my uniqueness, right? So, now, you may sit down and go, but Jazz, I like R&B and I like tea as well. That's absolutely fine. But I'm saying, what can I share with you that's just a little bit different? What can I share with you that you maybe won't find if you just Google, right? How can I share something that makes me a little bit unique, that drives a little bit of what I do and how I show up? So that ultimately becomes a huge thing for you to do when it comes to your personal brand. And to that end, even as I'm going through the things that are the truth, I want you to reflect on how well you are executing on your personal brand. Are you cognizant of the online and the offline touch points? Have you had an experience perhaps where somebody's been able to talk about you or mention your name in rooms that you're not in? Does it feel genuine or authentic, or does it feel ever so slightly exhausting, or do you avoid it altogether because it's just too much work? Does it have what you're great at the forefront, or do you just look very copy and paste to your colleagues who have a similar role or your peers who operate in the same industry? And is there something unique that you're sharing as you communicate this personal brand? And the best way for you to really understand and to a certain extent do a little bit of a checkpoint on it is what I call the truth and the strength. So it's very easy for us to go, I'm really good at personal branding, or I'm really bad at it, or I have no clue where to start. That makes it very difficult and overwhelming to decide your next step towards improvement or up leveling. So what I really encourage folks to do is to assess your personal brand based on the truth and the strength. Now, I will be asking you to share in the chat on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being, I don't think I do this part well at all, and 5 being like, spot on, it's amazing, I've seen results, I've seen evidence to this, right, as number 5. So the truth. So when we talk about the truth of your personal brand, I'm going to use myself as an example because it's easier. I have had a background in hospitality and in property. I have been intentional in building my personal brand within tech and within coaching. So if I am to meet more people who associate me with hospitality, even though I haven't worked there for about 13 years, then the truth of my personal brand isn't where I want it to be, because they're remembering me, but they're remembering the wrong things. It's slightly off, it's slightly outdated. And then on the other side, we've got the strength, right? Are they remembering you at all? Do they remember where they met you? Do they remember anything else about you? Are you memorable? Are you top of mind, or at least somewhere in mind? Or have you completely disappeared from consciousness for most of the people who encounter your personal brand, or you indeed? So on a scale of 1 to 5, I want you to take a moment while I again sip some more water, because water is good for you. I want you to give us 2 scores, the strength and the truth. And again, we're all growing and developing in this place, that you can just share it and everyone. And of course, if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's fine. I just want to make sure that you note it down for yourself. Okay, amazing. I can see here we've got some answers. So truth, 3, strength, 5. Love it. Yeah. Great. I'm loving seeing these scores coming in. And again, as much as I use the language of score, it's a checkpoint. Nobody's judging you. Personal brands are personal. They should stay that way. Okay, amazing. So I want you to keep hold of those numbers. And that in many ways is part of the beauty of popping it in the chat. You can scroll back to it very easily, because I will ask you a little reflection point on this as we move forward. But I want to go into the quote unquote key ingredient, the secret ingredient, the part that folks tend to miss. And ultimately, this is the core principle of an authentic personal brand. And this is what helps us understand where we should really begin when we start thinking about it. When we think about our values, we really are reflecting on what we believe, who we are, and what we do. Okay. And so when we look at the definition of values, these are principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what's important in life. And this is what I mean when I say for it to be authentic, it should be personal to you. What's important to me might be completely different to what's important to you for different reasons. We all exist and have a different lived experience. But ultimately, one of the ways we can improve our personal brand, both in terms of the strength and the truth, and to take it to the next level, is by connecting with our values. So we're going to talk about those, right? What are values? Because when we also then think about values, some of the words that might come up are morals, ethics, right? These are all part of the shared language of how we show up in life and work. And that's another reason why what you believe, who you are, and what you do tends to be at the bottom. We tend to introduce ourselves with what we do. We give the job title, we give the business, we give the role, we give the remit, we give the project. It's very rare that we share what we believe. And even rarer sometimes that we share who we are. And I just want to give this a little bit of color by just sharing some of these values in context, because you may be sitting here thinking, I've got my values, I know exactly what those are. But some of us might find that a little bit more challenging, tricky, or indeed vague. It can feel like one of those things. So when we think about values, I like to put them in context. So sustainability, affordable art, crediting work, equal pay, right to marriage. These are examples of values in context. If you are supporting any of these things, if these are any of your behaviors, if these are things that you champion, right? And when I say champion, we live in the day and age of social media. You can champion something without posting about it publicly. It could be the conversations that you have within your friendship groups, within your communities. This is by no means about peer pressure or visibility politics, right? This is about genuinely, actually, I pursue a sustainable life. I'm trying to go plastic free. That's a value in context. You value the planet. You have a deep sense of empathy. You believe in us, leaving this place better than we found it, etc., etc. This is a value in context. So then when we switch gears a little bit and we go into the values in career context, I am able to pick up on some of your values a little bit based on who you work for, how you're treated or permit yourself to be treated, right? What you choose to work on, which projects you work on, what's near and dear to your heart. And even if I was to color in some of these examples, I myself, I've left a role when I discovered I was being paid severely less than my male counterpart, who he himself confessed he does less work than me and he's less senior than me, right? That was my value and career context. I said, no, thank you. This is not how I want to be treated. What you work on. Do you take the extra care to be part of communities within your organization or within your local area? And then, of course, how we work. Do you value free time? Do you value flexibility? I have many friends really talking about their boundaries this year and saying, I don't want to take meetings on Friday. I want to use that to catch up on stuff. I don't want to pressure myself to wake up at 5 a.m. I've realized that I'd much rather take a walk in the afternoon, and that kind of gives me the freshness that I need. So these are values in context so they don't feel as abstract. But I'd really love to invite you to share, and I'll give you some time. I'm actually going to put 5 minutes on the clock for this. Again, it's not a quiz, but I want to ask you in this moment to take 5 minutes to write your values. Now, there's a QR code on the screen, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat with some words. It's a list of values. So it's got quite a few words there to inspire you, because I don't want you to get stuck. But I would love for you to take that 5 minutes, so we'll go until past, for you to write 5 values. 5, they can be your top ones, or they can be 5 that you gravitated towards, or indeed, if you do already have values in place, absolutely fine. Write those down, and then when you're ready, so write them for yourself, and then when you're ready, pop those in the chat if you feel comfortable to do so. So 5 minutes just to do this exercise. The QR code will take you to the document, but otherwise I've popped it in the chat for you. Any questions, let me know in the chat as well. Really enjoying seeing the values in the chat. We've got 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes for anyone else pulling those through. Ellen, that's right. You did the task fine. Amazing. Couple more seconds. And again, like I said, this is all in the recording. So if you want to revisit, you're more than welcome to. This is not an exam. Okay, so 5 minutes are up. So you've written down those values, and like I said, you can revisit this exercise, you can save the link, to come back to it later. But ultimately, what you then want to start to see is values in action, because values in action are important. It's the doing part of our core principle today, our secret source to our personal brand. So ultimately, here are some really important things to know when you reflect on your values in action. And I really, really want you, as I'm walking through this, to choose one. You can choose one of your values. And I want you to really, really pull out an example of it in action in your life. Okay. So when you write those values down, that's a really powerful thing to do, right? From a positive psychology point of view, writing something down does something different. It also allows you to redigest it. So you technically digest it twice when you write it down. It also then becomes something that can be a visual tool for you to remember those values. For me, I am dialing in from home today, but when I'm usually in my office in London, I have my values on sticky notes on my wall right behind my screen. I get to see them every day and really use that visual prompt to rewire my mind towards those things, to challenge me in, am I working with these values? You can also then use those values to set non-negotiables. So like I said, I left a role because I was being underpaid. Now, because my value is also transparency, I explained that that was the reason why I was leaving, but I still left. That was a boundary for me, and it was very much inspired by my values. You should also remember those moments of values in action. So that's why I'm encouraging you to choose any one of the values that you've noted down and you've shared with us. And of course, you can share this in the chat and share a moment of that value in action, or share a memory of when you realized that that was a value for you. One of the biggest cheat codes to understanding what your values are is thinking back to the moments where you were the most frustrated, upset, angry, right? All of those negative, passionate emotions. What was at the core of that? What was at the core of maybe someone you didn't get along with, or an organizational culture that didn't quite work for you? Now, I'm not a betting woman, but if you were to trace all of that back, it's highly, highly likely that somewhere in that your value was being pushed, right? Whatever was happening was coming head to head with what you believe, and it wasn't working out for that reason. So I want you to remember those moments of values in action, both in the positive sense, the empowered sense, but also in that moment of, actually, that's the reason why that environment didn't work for me. The other thing to keep in mind is to check your gut. As a coach, I work with folks in an embodied way. And as woo-woo as that sounds, it's not. It is us understanding that in many ways our body can tell us things. So a gut feeling is a very real thing. It's connected to our conscience, right? Just in the same way that when we're experiencing stress and burnout, we can feel tenseness in our shoulders and our jaws tight and our minds race. This is a physical embodiment of what we are going through. So when you sit in that chair, or you enter that room or that meeting or that conversation, check your gut. Are my values, do I have space for my values here? Are they being upheld here? Are they safe here? Am I therefore safe here? And then again, you want to prioritize your values. It's okay to design your life around your values. It's okay to change things in accordance with your values to have more congruence. And ultimately, the other thing is we want to understand, acknowledge, and respect each other's values. So yes, a working environment or a colleague may not be the best person for you, or the best place that you want to spend lots of time at. But the reality is we're going to respect our differences, right? We're not here to convince, I'm not here to convince you to have different values. A, that would never work. B, it's none of my business, even as a career coach. But C, it's not sustainable. We have to learn to exist in harmony. And in many ways, that's about us acknowledging that there's a reason that you believe what you believe, just like there's a reason that I believe what I believe. And ultimately, then when we start to look at those values, we can then go and turn them into something that is lived, that we can then express, and our personal brand becomes an expression of that. So when we look at our values, it's what we believe, it's who we are, and then what we do. That becomes the core principle. And ultimately, you want to understand, do they match? Do your values match your organizational culture? right? Are they personal to you, right? Are you able to see them evident through your own behaviors and your own habits? Your responses and your reactions, they are different. Okay, they are different. Responses are more considered and thought. We typically have space to respond to things. Reactions are in the moment. And quite often when we reflect on our reactions to things, they become the thing that we maybe would have changed. And then as we go through that, then we start to see the personal brand. So I understand talking about values can feel quite abstract, but ultimately when we then look at it, what you believe, who you are, and then what you do is the formula. The middle part is your personal brand. That's why it's authentic. We all want to believe that our personal brand is the answer to that, but only if you're being intentional about that, right? If you're being truthful about it and it feels safe for you to do so. That's why I asked you to think about your environment. It requires a level of belonging to truly be who you are in your professional environment, in your personal environment. All of this kind of comes into place. So when we maybe put this learning and this knowing into something like LinkedIn, I'm going to use it because it's an easy one to use. How often when you post or you comment, are you articulating some of the things that you believe? Are you articulating the things that are dear to you? Are you articulating the things that make you unique and are unique to you? Or are you just sharing what you do, what you did, where you went? And there's nothing wrong with sharing that. But if you went somewhere, share a little bit more of what that meant to you, right? I spoke on a Women in Tech panel last year and I posted and I said, this is what I did today. This is who I met. I love meeting new people. It excites me to meet new people and really see how unique we are and support one another. Now, that's more than just look at me with the microphone in my hand at this event. I'm giving you a glimpse into who I am in many ways, helping you to see what makes me different, leaving you with those little nuggets that you'd remember. So that's the core principle that I want you to keep in mind, because what you believe then informs who you are and what you do, and your personal brand should have all of them, not just the last part. So I'm just having a look in the chat here, and I absolutely love what's being shared. And I want to encourage you, please take a moment to reflect on your values and how they're showing up and how you're putting them and weaving them into that personal brand of yours. So I just want to read out some of the comments here. So work-life balance for myself and people who work for or with me. In a previous role, the leadership culture pushed myself and valued colleagues towards burnout, reducing our ability to deliver at our best and affecting our health and well-being. Yeah, values, friction. Oh, and then another example. Thank you so much for sharing these examples of values in action. Well-being empowerment. I chose to leave my corporate career in finance as the 9-to-5 role didn't allow space for me to raise my family, pursue our family business goals, and empower me to who I need to be outside of the confines of the professional roles I held over that 20 plus year period. Again, values in action. They've inspired you to make a decision. And I want you to just take a little moment here to just reflect overall, right? Going right back to the strength and the truth of your personal brand. I would love for you to take a moment and ask yourself, and of course you can share this in the chat, what words would others use to describe you? Who would they say that you are? Because that can be one of the most interesting and powerful ways for you to understand the strength and the truth of your personal brand. Are they picking up what you're putting down? Or are they getting something slightly different? Do they know how much you value well-being and empowerment? Do they know that? Can they see that in how you operate? Is that articulated in your boundaries? Is that articulated in your way of work and how you engage with people? I want you to reflect on that. Does it line up? And this is not about us being able to copy and paste our descriptive words with theirs, but it's about us understanding, maybe I'm not showing up in the way that I want to. It's a space to remind us that we can be intentional about it. So I can see, oh, some of the things weren't visible in the chat as it was just sent to me. So when we're sharing in the chat, just be sure to change it to everyone so everyone can read. So ultimately, it boils down to two things: the strength and the truth. But the difference now is being able to infuse that with your values, infuse that with the who, more of the who, in fact, many times, and the why in terms of what you believe than the what. Like I said, I'm a lover of R&B and tea. My LinkedIn might not necessarily tell you that. My website does. My podcast does. But you might not get that here at first, but you might get that in person, right? These are really, really important. And I absolutely love what you've said in the chat there. I don't know if you pronounce your name Gilly or Gilly, correct me. But you mentioned soft G, Gilly. I recently used Menti tool to poll my peers in my team on what they thought my values or strengths and what I could work on. I love this. Getting other folks to hold up the mirror can be one of the most powerful things that you can do around any career growth, ultimately, but especially personal brand, because it's that interaction between what you do and say and your intention and their perception of that. So getting a pulse on that can be really powerful, especially in an environment where your progress is dependent on the peers' feedback. And I love that you added that it's anonymous, because I think quite often we forget that feedback is still just as valuable if you don't know where it's coming from. Also, it helps us pull out a little bit of the emotion from it. We're able to kind of amalgamate it and take it in a very neutral way. So I'd love to ask you, as we close, before we jump into questions, on a scale of 1 to 5, if you were to infuse your values into your personal brand, and you're more than welcome to let us know how you plan to do that going forward, how would you then rate the strength and the truth of your personal brand? And I'll give you a moment to share that with us in the chat. So choosing one action that you're going to take to really refresh or establish your authentic personal brand. Once you did that, how would you then rate the strength and truth of your personal brand? For some of you, where one was lower than the other, maybe the action that you want to take is on the lower number. Or maybe you want to amplify and do more of the higher number. Maybe this is a place to celebrate how well you're doing on the strength or the truth. Okay. So like I said, you'll be able to come back to this recording to do this exercise for yourself. I encourage you, come back to it once a quarter. Really do that check-in and that tune up and just really ask myself, am I showing up in the way that I want to? Because it can be so, so powerful to make those small intentional changes, being a little bit more open, sharing a little bit more of the why, sharing what you got from it, how it aligns to your values. If you feel comfortable to sharing your actual values, sharing them and where they came from. And again, like I said, this doesn't all have to be us sharing online. This can be a coffee chat. This can be a conversation you have with a mentee or a mentor. These are all just opportunities for us to plant these seeds of our authentic personal brands. So we have 15 minutes left for questions and indeed reflections. Now, if you have a question, I'd love to ask you to put it in the Q&A, because then it's all in one place. But if you have a reflection, please go ahead and pop that into the chat. I'm also sharing my details, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, email me, reach out. I am available if you want to continue talking or something comes to you a little bit later. But for now, we have the last portion of our time dedicated to Q&A. Okay, it's not a question, but it's a reflection from Kerry, and I love it, so I'm going to read it out. One action I've started to take is to answer the question, why this role in interviews, to lead with how it aligns with my values, and then link to skills, experience, etc. 1000%. Yeah. And in general, I'm a huge fan of asking questions in interviews. That is the biggest thing that you can do. It's the greatest opportunity for you to do a sense check on their values. Ask them questions about their values in action, right? And understand how you can show up and contribute in that space. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else want to share a reflection in the chat? I know a few folks have to hop off. It is lunchtime, depending on where you are. Okay, so we have a question here. So I'm going to answer it. I'm actually going to stop screen sharing as well. It's a lot easier that way. What place does more hard skills or knowledge experience play in a personal brand? Are you able to share a little bit around what you mean by hard skills or knowledge? Do you mean like if you work in tech, the coding language, for instance, or the softwares that you're able to use and things like that? Okay, yeah. So that definitely plays a part because it goes back to what I said about really championing what you're great at, not just good at. And for many of us, you know, there are stories that we can tell around those hard skills that aren't just, I know how to do this. You can tell stories around how you applied that skill. You can share how you learned that skill. For many folks, some skills are self-taught. For some, you've had it since you were a child. Both are perfectly valid and interesting nuggets that you can share because they also then articulate something about you. Early on, somebody said that they're a lifelong learner. If you share how you self-taught yourself something or how you've had a particular skill since a very young age, I'm picking up the lifelong learner part through how you've just articulated that. You also, in terms of applying your question to an interview or an opportunity scenario, you're also then able to communicate the impact of that skill. So we don't just have skills for skills' sake, right? We don't just have massive CVs just to be able to create a list of courses and programs and certifications. That is incredibly boring to an employer. They want to know, what did you do with that insight or that knowledge? Right? In the same way that internally, your manager, your team lead, your director wants to know, we sent you on that course. What did you then do? How did you make an impact? How did you change things? What strategic advantage do you now have now that you have this new knowledge? So they can very much be within it and be at the core of it. And actually, you can then wrap those quote unquote softer skills around it, or indeed your values, because they will be connected also. Hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to add in a follow-up if you have one. Any other questions, feel free to pop it in the Q&A. I'm glad. Don't forget, before you dash off, scroll up and grab those LinkedIn profiles. Let's connect with each other and support each other as we go ahead and put all of this into practice and really establish our authentic personal brands. Okay, another question. What would you say is a way to communicate your brand via LinkedIn? I'm stuck for ideas aside from writing or sharing articles. So anything that you had in mind to write as an article, if you're stuck for ideas and those don't feel like good ideas, you can do different things. So actually, let me rewind on my answer here. Communication comes in many forms, and there are some forms that come easier to us than others. When you go onto platforms like LinkedIn, just like maybe your company intranet, things like that, there are some parts which take a lot of effort and energy for you to do. I know I love talking, right? I love talking. I also love writing. In that sense, I'm a very weird person. But for most of my friends, and I think, Cheryl, you said you're a coach, for most of my friends who are entrepreneurial in some way, shape, or form, there's one of them they can't stand and one they can do in their sleep. Find which format that is. So for you, when you look at a platform like LinkedIn, video content exists on LinkedIn. So we're having this in a Zoom webinar. If you have thoughts, perspectives, you've just come off a call with a client and you want to share a theme or a thought, click, open up your phone and just go live on LinkedIn, or pre-record it and post the video with the key point. If it is easier for you to speak your message and to speak your personal brand, go ahead and do that. Now, if it's easier for you to write it, you decide whether that's long form or short form. Some of the most successful posts on LinkedIn are 2 sentences. But I don't say that to say that because they're short. I say that because they're potent. Distill the message that you have into its most impactful format, and the format that makes you feel most confident and comfortable. Because remember, when we come to personal branding, it's energy. If I showed up today and said, "Hi, everybody, how are you doing? I want to talk to you about personal branding," and not sure. You'd be thinking, this Jazz girl, I'm not sure she can help me. She doesn't seem sure she's in the right place, right? And I share that as a very dramatic example of how much that you have all learnt about me in this past hour that I haven't necessarily said, right? You've picked it up, you've been able to perceive it. I've communicated it in some way. I am handsy. Not that that's a part of my personal brand, but it could be something that you remember about me. I'm expressive, right? That could be something that you remember. So find the format that you are most confident in and that comes easier to you. And that's a big thing. It's a little bit of a tangent, but it's a big thing. You're allowed to find things easy. You are allowed to be talented. You are allowed to say, I know that this is tough for some people, but for me, it's absolutely fine. There is no shame in that. We all excel at different things. So it's so important to do that. So hopefully that helps. But LinkedIn, you can do a newsletter, you can do pre-recorded video, you can do live video, you can do events. You've got audio on there now as well. You can do posts, you can do polls, you can do PDF files, you know, and I understand I'm answering this from an entrepreneurial perspective. Those of you who are in roles, you can use LinkedIn to share projects that you're excited about. And I know in your mind, you're going, I can't spill the company secrets. You don't need to do that, because it's less about the what, it's more about the how. Today, I had a great meeting discussing a project, and I realized how important it is for everybody to be able to contribute. So I chose to chair the meeting today and realized how powerful that was, because I really believe it's important everyone has a voice when we're working together in a team. I just made that up. But if I read that from you, I know that you value community, fairness, equity. I also know you're doing interesting work that you're excited enough about to tell us about it. And then especially if you end it to go, what about you? Does anyone else have chairs in their meetings? Does anyone else ensure that everyone gets a chance to contribute? How are you doing that? What are your techniques? And you're starting a conversation with other people who connect with that. So hopefully that helps. Okay, just having a look in the chat here. Okay, so we've got another question here. We've got plenty of time, by the way. So if you do have another question, you're looking at the clock, don't worry about it. 6 minutes is more than enough. So next question, do you have any tips on managing the transition between our experience to the intentional where we want to evolve to, so it doesn't seem contradictory, i.e. moving from financial services to social entrepreneurship? Yes. Find the thread that ties between. So if I use myself as an example, I had a background in hospitality, property, and then tech. And then I've been a coach for 5 years. So you go, ooh, that's a lot. But the reality is, regardless of which industry role I was in, it was always people and process for me, right? And it's actually the same when I'm in my community manager tech role and when I'm a coach. I am totally focused on people, but I also believe in process. So I love to do a lot of automation in my business. I love to give my clients tools. I love to create coaching tools and methodologies and things that they can kind of pick and choose and plug into whatever is happening in their life at that moment. So I had to sit down and look at my experience and find the thread. So the way that I specifically did that is I got an A3 piece of paper and I wrote down every experience. Work experience, roles, also life experience. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I grew up in a very big community. So there's a sense of volunteering. There's a sense of things like that. So when I say experience, don't just think CV. I want you to think life, right? Some of you in here are parents. Tell me about that experience. And when you write down each of those experiences, write down, what did you learn? What did you learn in that specific experience? Which strengths and skills did you apply in that particular experience? And if indeed it is a role or an experience that you moved on from, why did you move on? And do that for each of those experiences. You will start to see the same skills and strengths come up all over the place. So if I was to use the example, and this is me not even knowing your full story or journey, if you shared your LinkedIn, I could probably weave something for you. But ultimately, moving from financial services to social entrepreneurship, there might be an element of you understanding, and I'm making this up, everyone, maybe wealth is at the bottom of it. Maybe working in financial services helps you understand how much money can be a tool for social change. And that inspires you to move into social entrepreneurship. You've always been passionate about equity and financial education, right? Or financial awareness. And so that this is just a new way of you putting it out. So the biggest way when you tie that thread, it's ultimately you showing up and saying, I am this person that I've always been. I've always been passionate about X. I've always been obsessed with X. I've always been very interested in X. It's just how I'm expressing that passion is different now. Instead of being in financial services, I'm expressing that passion as a social entrepreneur. If I use myself as an example, I'm passionate about people. By day, I express that as a community manager. All other hours, I express this as a coach for ambitious people, right? Still same me in the middle, expressions are different. And in that sense, we get to have as many expressions as we want, but we can just do the quote unquote hard work of articulating it for people. We package it nicely and we go, people and process. Finances or money as a tool for change and transformation. So hopefully that helps. Feel free to post in a follow-up. If anyone else has any other questions, please go ahead and drop those in the chat. We are here, sorry, in the Q&A. The chat might get a little bit lost.